Well, we're joined now by the Prime Minister, Theresa May. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
It's a pleasure to be here for your new programme, Sophie.
Thank you. Well, we've just been watching that film from Boston where people were talking about their concerns about immigration, about wages being undercut, about concerns about antisocial behaviour. And I was really struck by some of that anger at how immigration has been managed. While you were Home Secretary, immigration went up to record levels. So are you to blame for some of that anger?
No, we put a number of changes in place in relation to immigration when we came in, precisely because we recognised the concerns that people had about immigration. The reason why we were looking to bring those changes in was because we knew that, particularly for people on lower incomes, immigration did have an impact on their wages. But I think what the film that we've just seen shows that when people voted in the referendum on the 23rd of June, yes, they voted to leave the European Union, but they also voted for change. And this year, 2017, is the year in which we start to make that happen. And that's why, over the coming weeks, I'll be setting out more details of my plan for Britain. And yes, that's about getting the right deal for Brexit, but it's also about economic reform. We'll be publishing a housing white paper, a green paper on our industrial strategy. It's also about social reform. I'm giving a speech tomorrow. I'm going to focus on some of the injustices, particularly mental health, and the stigma that still attaches to mental health. So it's about getting the right deal internationally. It's also about a fair deal at home.
I'm very keen to talk about your domestic policy agenda and your shared society. But let's just stick to immigration and Brexit for a moment, because certainly that is what a lot of people are very concerned about at the moment. Do you think that people will trust you to deliver that? Because you haven't always been able to deliver in the past. I think we can just bring up on the screen, actually, something that you said back in 2010 when you were Home Secretary about reducing net migration to the tens of thousands. The British people want us to do it, and it's the right thing to do, so we will do it. But you didn't do it, so why should people think it's different this time?
Well, I think what people will look at is the fact, first of all, that we recognise the importance of immigration. We were the first government to say that, yes, this is an issue that we need to address. Precisely because of the problems, precisely because of the impact it has on people, particularly those on low incomes, as I say, and research has shown that in certain circumstances it does lead to mean that people aren't able to get jobs and that their income is held down. They get lower wages as a result. So that's why...
a red line then for you in the Brexit negotiations? Will immigration be a red line?
Well, if I can just finish, that's why we looked at changing and did bring changes to immigration from outside the EU. But of course, immigration from inside the EU with free movement was an area that we weren't able to bring any controls into. I've consistently said that the referendum vote was a vote for us to change that freedom of movement, was a vote for us to bring control into our immigration system for people coming from the European Union. There's a variety of ways in which that can be done, but I'm clear that that is part of what we need to deliver.
So does that mean that in the EU negotiations you are prepared to prioritise full control over immigration above membership of the single market?
Well, you see, this is where it's important for us to look at this issue in the right way, because I think often people talk in terms as if somehow we're leaving the EU, but we still want to kind of keep bits of membership of the EU. We're leaving. We're coming out. We're not going to be a member of the EU any longer. So the question is, what is the right relationship for the UK to have with the European Union when we're outside? We will be able to have control of our borders, control of our laws. This is what people were voting for on the 23rd of June. But of course, we still want the best possible deal for us companies to be able to trade, UK companies to be able to trade in and operate within the European Union, and also European companies be able to trade with the UK and operate within the UK.
So if you're saying that we do want control of the borders, that effectively means we can't be members of the single market. Angela Merkel, for example, has been quite clear on this. This is what she said in December, that if you want free movement of goods and services, you need free movement of people. We will not allow any cherry picking. Be straight with people. We're not going to be members of the single market, are we?
What I'm talking about is getting the right relationship for the UK with the EU. We mustn't think about this as somehow we're coming out of membership, but we want to keep bits of membership. What we must say is what is the right relationship for a United Kingdom that is no longer a member of the European Union. And there's a whole range of issues on which we obviously will be part of the negotiations once I trigger Article 50 and we enter those formal negotiations. A big bit of that, of course, is what our trading relationship is. There are other areas, like on the justice and security front, about what our relationship continues to be in those areas as well. But what we're saying is, what is the right deal for the UK? Not a model that somebody else uses, but what's going to work for the UK. And I think that the best possible deal for the UK will also be a good deal for the EU. We're leaving the EU, we're not leaving Europe. We want to continue to have those good relationships with members of the European Union.
It's the third time I've asked the question. I was hoping to get an answer about immigration and single market. I know that you don't want to give a running commentary, but I think it is important for people to know the broad basis of where we're going. That's certainly what people in Boston were keen to know.
Yes,
are you prioritising immigration over membership of the single market?
What I'm saying is this. I mean, first of all, I will be setting out some more details in the coming weeks as we look ahead to triggering Article 50. But what I'm saying is that I think it's wrong to look at this as just a binary issue, as to either you have control of immigration or you have a good trade deal. I don't see it as a binary issue. We will, outside the European Union, be able to have control of immigration and be able to set our rules for people coming to the UK from member states of the European Union. But we also, as part of that Brexit deal, will be working to get the best possible deal in the trading relationship with the European Union.
OK, I think that is clearer. We are getting control of immigration. I think we can perhaps read between the lines there. One person who perhaps wasn't so confident in your plan for Brexit this week was your chief diplomat to Brussels, who resigned. Sir Ivan Rogers as well wrote a pretty explosive letter while he did it, attacking what he described as ill-founded arguments and muddled thinking. Prime Minister, are you muddled?
Not at all. And if I can just come back to the last point, just to reiterate this point, because I think it's very important. Anybody who looks at this question of free movement and trade as a sort of zero-sum game is approaching it in the wrong way. I'm ambitious for what we can get for the UK in terms of our relationship with the European Union, because I also think that's going to be good for the European Union. So our thinking on this isn't muddled at all. Yes, we've been taking time. I said we wouldn't trigger Article 50 immediately. Some said we should. Jeremy Corbyn said we should. But actually, there hadn't been any plans made for Brexit, so it was important for us to take some time to actually look at the issues, look at the complexity of the issues, and that's why, as I said we didn't trigger immediately, but we will trigger by the end of March this year. The work that has been done has set out very clearly for us how complex this is, but also how important it is for us to approach this in the right way. And the right way to look at this is to say we will be outside the EU. As I say, we're not leaving Europe. We want a good relationship with the EU, good bilateral relationships with individual countries. But we will be outside the European Union, but we will get the best possible deal for the UK in terms of our trading relationship with the European Union.
Everything you're saying suggests that we are leaving the single market and trying to have trade deals. Why don't you just admit it?
Yeah. What I'm saying is that we want the best possible deal. The phrase I've used is the best possible deal for trading with and operating within the single European market. Now, we want prosperity for our businesses for the future. I think this is an important relationship for us, and it's an important relationship for member states as well, for countries in the European Union, for their businesses too. But what I'm looking at is not the means to the end, but what the outcome is. And I think this is so important. What people want is for us to focus on the right outcome for the UK. Actually, there'll be a variety of ways in which we get there. But people who simply talk about issues around membership of the single market, access to the single market, are looking at the means. I'm looking at the outcome, and the outcome is a really good, ambitious trade deal for the UK with the European Union that enables our companies to trade with and trade in and operate in the European single market. And that's for both goods and services, because, of course, for the UK, financial services, the services sector generally, is a very important part of our economic relationship with the EU.
80% of the UK GDP services, of course. Sir Ivan Rogers, how embarrassing was that for you?
Yeah. So Ivan Rogers had been a dedicated civil servant. He made it clear that he would have been leaving in November anyway. Sir Tim Barrow is an excellent negotiator. He's replaced Sir Ivan. He's got a very good experience in Europe. But this is not just about one individual in a particular post. It's actually about how the whole of government is approaching this. And that's why, I set up a specific department, the Department for Exiting the European Union, with the Secretary of State, David Davis, with civil servants who are focusing on the Brexit arrangements. But obviously they're working across the whole of government as well. Every department is looking at the issues that they will need to address as we leave the European Union and consider not just what that deal is in relation to the EU, but what is the future for the UK. And that's where I'm optimistic and ambitious, because we will be able to have trade deals around the world. We'll be able to ensure that we're doing what is right for the UK.
I'm keen to talk about your domestic policy agenda as well. Before we go on to your vision for a shared society, I do want to ask you about the NHS, because that is the number one issue that people have been contacting me about, saying you must ask the Prime Minister about this. And things do look pretty bad. The Red Cross said yesterday it's the humanitarian crisis with people dying in trolleys on corridors. What are you going to do?
Well, I don't accept the description the Red Cross has made of this. Yes, there are huge pressures on the NHS, but I think first of all we should thank all those dedicated professionals in the NHS who've been working so hard over what is always a difficult period in terms of the number of people using the NHS. That's the Christmas and New Year period. We had, I think it was something like 150,000 medical professionals working in the NHS on Christmas and Day and New Year's Day. And I want to say thank you to them for the work that they're doing. Yes, there are significant pressures, but we've recognised those pressures. We asked the NHS a while back to set out what it needed over the next 5 years in terms of its plan for the future and the funding that it would need. They did that. We gave them that funding. In fact, we gave them more funding than they required. So funding is now at record levels for the NHS. More money has been going in.
So, just quickly, from your answer, it doesn't seem like you're gearing up to do an emergency statement on the NHS tomorrow, as some people have asked for.
There are pressures in the NHS, and we see those pressures. We have an ageing population. This brings pressures, particularly in the interface between the health service and social care. That's why we've taken some immediate steps in relation to that issue, but we're also looking to ensure best practice in the NHS and looking for a long-term solution to what has been a problem that's been ducked by government over the years. But the NHS is facing the pressures of the ageing population. That's why it's important that it's the NHS itself that has produced its 5-year plan and is now putting that plan into practice.
Tomorrow you're going to be giving a speech on the shared society, which sounds like a great slogan, but what are the actual details behind what you want to do?
Well, I think, first of all, what's important is that we recognise this is about dealing with everyday injustices, but it's also about us all recognising our obligations as citizens within the communities and the society that we have here in the UK. It's about recognising that there is a role for government, but government needs to ensure that it is acting as effectively as possible in those areas where it should be taking action. And one of the areas that I'm going to focus on tomorrow particularly is the whole area of mental health. There's still a huge stigma attached to mental health here in the United Kingdom. I was talking to somebody earlier today and they were making the point that in the workplace, if you break your arm and you go in with your arm in plaster or in a sling, people will come up and talk to you about it. If you have a mental health problem, people are more likely to try to avoid you. We must get over this stigma. We must ensure that we're providing the services for people with mental health. Work's already been done, more money is going in terms of the NHS. But I'm going to be setting out tomorrow some more areas where we need to start the work. It's not a 5-minute job. We can't deal with these issues just overnight. It's not about one speech. It is about driving reform forward over a period of time and being honest with the public that this does take time to deal with.
Clearly something you're passionate about. How much new money are you putting into it?
There will be some money going into the mental health in the NHS. There's already an extra £1 billion going into mental health in the NHS.
Because just on that NHS, the £1 billion funding to the NHS for health, 90% of mental health trusts saying it's not enough money. That's research by NHS providers last year.
Well, there is that £1 billion going in. There are some other sums of money that are being used within the NHS to deal with this mental health problems and to deal with aspects that sometimes people don't think about. Just if I can give you one example of something I've already done. When I was in the Home Office, one of the the issues that concerned me was people in mental health crisis being taken to a police cell as a place of last resort. It wasn't good for them, it wasn't good for the police. Actually, we've changed that. We've seen the number for whom that happens coming down by 80%. And that was a small sum of money that the NHS has been able to put in order to ensure that there's more, for example, more and different places of safety for people.
Just to press you on the ring-fenced new money for mental health, because otherwise there is a danger it will just be swallowed up by the crisis in the NHS, isn't it?
Well, but first of all, money is going into mental health, but it's always wrong for people to assume that the only answer to these issues is about funding. Yes, there are some issues there, and we have been looking at those and addressing those. But actually, if we look at the issue of mental health in this country, I think it's more about the stigma that still attaches to mental health. It's about how we all recognise 1 in 4 people, 1 in 4 of us, will suffer from some mental health issue through their lives. What we need to ensure is that the parity of esteem that we've established between physical health and mental health is actually carried forward, not just in the NHS, but in society at large as well, so that people recognise that they can also offer support and help to people with mental health and they don't shy away from it.
OK. Keen now to talk about more global issues as well, because, of course, 2017 is a year where lots of sands are shifting across the world. How troubled are you by the fact that the US intelligence agencies are claiming that President Putin of Russia has interfered with the presidential election?
Well, of course, the whole question of cyber attacks and state-sponsored cyber attacks is one that is not new, and this is something that we need to pay attention to and that we need to guard against. It's important that we take that whole issue of cybersecurity very seriously, and we have done here in the UK. One of the first things that David Cameron did in his government was actually to put extra money into this whole question of cybersecurity.
And bearing in mind the apparent closeness of Donald Trump to Vladimir Putin, if Russia were to invade one of our NATO allies, say Estonia or Latvia, would the UK military be committed to defend that country?
Well, as you know, the Article 5 of NATO says that we do go to the support of any NATO country that has military action against it.
Yes.
So, and just one of the important point I'd like to make, actually, because sometimes people think that there is going to be a change in American approach to NATO. From the conversations I've had, I think America remains fully committed to NATO, as we do. And we're already taking some steps to show the seriousness with which NATO considers its responsibilities. There will be UK troops on exercise in Estonia this year.
Staying on Donald Trump, I know that you're passionate about equality and helping other women. You showed that as your record as Minister for Women and Equalities. Donald Trump tweeted last night that he's looking forward to meeting you next month. And I'm just very interested to know your feelings before that meeting, bearing in mind some of the things that Donald Trump said about women. Now, I'll probably feel slightly awkward reading this out, but I do think it's important to rehear what Donald Trump was recorded saying in the past, which is about women. When you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the pussy. I mean, forgetting the fact that you're Prime Minister for a moment, how does that make you feel as a woman?
Well, look, I think that's unacceptable. But in fact, Donald Trump himself has said that and has apologised for it. But the relationship that the UK has with the United States is about something much bigger than just the relationship between the two individuals as President and Prime Minister. That's important. But actually we have a long-standing special relationship with the United States. It's based on shared values. And it's a relationship where actually in the UK we feel we can say to the US if we disagree with something that they're doing.
So
but it's because we've got that.
Disagree with Donald Trump?
Well, I've just said that it's unacceptable. But also he himself, I believe, has gone on to say that it was unacceptable and has apologised for it. But the special relationship that we have with the United States is an important relationship. It's an important relationship in terms of security and stability around the world, but also, obviously, as we work together with the United States and counter-terrorism matters, for example, a very important special relationship. From the conversations I've already had, I've had 2 very good, positive conversations with Donald Trump already. From the conversations I've had, I think we're going to look to build on that relationship for the benefit of both the US and the UK. And I think that's something that's optimistic and positive for the UK for the future.
So sometimes does pragmatism have to trump principle then?
What I'm talking about is a relationship that exists between the United Kingdom and the United States. Yes, if we think something's unacceptable, we say that. But actually, this is about more than one issue. It's about a long-standing relationship between us that has been an important bedrock for security and stability globally, and that we want to build on. We want to build on in economic terms. I think there's greater prosperity for both of us if we build on that relationship and strengthen it.
Prime Minister Theresa May, thank you very much for an illuminating interview.